Wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
It's an absolute pleasure to be your guest. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm looking forward to getting in to your world of neuro encoding and being an author and all of these wonderful aspects of what you do. And to begin this journey, probably one of the things that was seminal for all of us was 5 years ago living through this pandemic. How did you get through that time period, and how many waves still exist that you feel today?
So you're going to get an answer that you probably did not expect. I loved the pandemic.
Okay.
And I loved the pandemic for a lot of reasons. First of all, it didn't allow me to spend money. So I created new habits of spending because there was nowhere to spend money.
Yeah.
Second of all, I reconnected with nature because you couldn't go anywhere. So I started going more for walks, riding bikes, and getting to know my area from the perspective of parks and trees and flowers and all the 9 yards. Now, I did miss my friends and I did miss the connection, but I did live with my two grown daughters at that time. So I did have humans inside the house. Um, and that allowed me to also rethink what I want to do in life. And it allowed me to go, well, yeah, I'm doing good, but am I fulfilled? Is this where I want to go? And I went, not really. And because there was nothing to do outside of parks and walking and, riding a bike, I started taking courses and I run into what I'm doing today right before the pandemic. And it started at the pandemic or a little bit before. Dr. Amen's Brain Revolution with Dr. Joseph McClendon III. I fell in love and I'm like, I can change the world with this one person or 100 people at a time. This is absolutely insanely phenomenal, based in science, based in neuroscience. It can be practical. And I'm like, I have this gift of translating difficult things into simplicity. I'm like, what if I could take all my knowledge and all those smart people and make it usable for everyday person?
Yeah.
And so I fortunately loved it and it did me very good. I paid off all my debt. I read a lot of books. There was what were the things that I didn't like about it? Of course. Yet I've learned also to concentrate on the benefits. How can I make this work for me? That's my magical question. How can I make this? Because, things that we don't like are going to show up either way.
Yeah.
What if we ask every time you don't like something, how can I make this work for me? What can I either learn from this or maybe it will create an ability to overcome some type of an obstacle and that will bring out and build my white matter and my great matter in my brain.
Yeah.
What if because of this I'll create resilience and create new neural pathways? What if because of this I'll learn what I really don't like and I will never repeat that mistake again? I call this, expelling future, not compelling future, but expelling future.
Yeah.
So it is the way you look at things. Things are what they are. And it's us who gives the meaning. It
Yeah.
is us who chooses what it means to us and how we're going to react to it. And if this is my choice, I'm definitely not putting myself down because me and you and none of us had any control over it.
Yeah. Where are you located on the planet?
I'm in Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So if I put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids right now to get to the heart and soul of what you do for a living, and one of the kids in the back of the room, it's career day, says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
Imagine that you have a brain that you really, really love. And that brain plays tricks on you and makes you do things and react and forget things and get angry. What if you could control what your brain does? That's what I do. Help you create your brain from scratch so it does whatever you tell it to instead of what it wants to do. You are the master. You are the superhero of your brain, and everything is much easier after that.
So what did you want to be when you were a kid, when you were in that position in life?
I was singing. My mother is an actress and I sing still. I wanted to be a singer. I never wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing, or a firefighter, but I did want to sing. And I been on stages my whole life. And when I stopped singing because of my teenage adolescence, I'm going to be different than you, mom approach, which is a very difficult thing for teenagers. I started doing HR and speaking on stages, and I became a teacher, which after 11 years, it turned out that didn't have enough variety, so I left that profession. But because of that, I was a lot on stages, speaking on stages, on TV in Europe, and I got my kind of dopamine and, adoration fix that way.
So, what were the foundational seeds that were planted into you early on in life that eventually led to you helping people find their right brains and their right thought processes?
So I think there are a few things. First of all, I come from a loving but extremely dysfunctional family. I tell my friends who are writing a PhD that if you want to find all the dysfunctions in one family, just visit mine.
Yeah,
They have it all.
yeah,
From a father who's an alcoholic, mother who is self-absorbed and an artist and tells her kids that, if she would have to choose being on stage or visiting you after surgery, she'll choose being on stage. And she really, it's not her being a bad person. It is how she constructed her life. And that's where she gets her validation from, right? And visiting a hospital creates fear, which we don't want to feel. So we move away from it. And, not everybody has the gift of speech and being considerate. My mother doesn't.
yeah.
Um, and then my brother who has a bipolar and another brother who is on a spectrum. So like I have everything. I have everything there. And me being epileptic at the same time being laughed at because people thought I was a drug addict. All of those things created my need to do something.
Yeah.
And the work ethic was always in my house. And I think those two things, overcoming continually obstacles. I was very withdrawn kid. I was never a kid that everybody loved. I was always sad. I was always contemplating. If I look at myself, I think, I could have used probably a coach at some point in my life. And I was also a nonconformist, right? Because you're not going to tell me what to do. I moved out of my house at age of 16 and never came back and managed to graduate with master's degree and now going for my PhD. So at home, one thing that was for sure, it was my grandma who loved me to the moon and back, my mother who was never there, and the rest of the whole bunch over there. And it was, doesn't matter what you have, push it through. And this is actually, if you look at historically, resilience and how societies are built, strong people build weak kids because we want our kids to have better than we did. That's
Yeah.
the biggest mistake we can make. I didn't make that mistake with my kids. I was a horribly strict mother. Um, and I passed that on. Do it better. Yes, you can. And I remember having a best friend in high school and in elementary school, and she would freaking study for half an hour. She would know everything.
Yeah.
It took me hours. I was dyslexic. I couldn't memorize things. I had to find ways to make it work. And that little thing created my life now, finding things that make it work. And then I saw so much pain around, but I wasn't an empath per se. But it was pissing me off that there are better ways of doing things, and why aren't we doing this?
Yeah.
So I was always looking for solutions, and all of that put together created the resilience and the perseverance and the getting up every time I get knocked down, and I do get knocked down very often, to the point where I had to start talking with my kids about what didn't work. Because one day my kid came to me, she goes, I'm never going to be like you. You have everything right. Everything comes out for you. I'm like, oh my Lord, that's not true.
Yeah.
How did you even think that? She goes, you did this, you did this, you did this. I'm like, okay, we're going to have dinners of failure. So we literally implemented dinners when I would talk about everything that didn't work out, everything that I couldn't everything that I couldn't manage, everything that I didn't get the job, I didn't get the contract, somebody was mean to me, and how I handled it.
Yeah.
And we normalized messing up because we seem to, as humans, right, tell everybody how amazing life is. And those who are not close to us and we don't talk about things that didn't work out have this image of this superhero Wonder Woman that never falls down. And that is so not true.
Yeah. So, who's been that hero for you, that inspirational force for what you've done in your life?
So interestingly enough, I never had one person. I always picked and choose from different people. And one of the people that I absolutely admire is Emma Watson.
Yeah.
She is this in the shadow type of a person who has achieved so much and is very focused on where she's going and there's no deviation. It's not even that I agree with everything, but I admire her. Another person that I absolutely admired, and she was kind of growing up with me, was Pink,
Yeah.
because we're more or less the same age, and her transitions and struggles were very much related to what I was going through. Another person at this time that I absolutely love is Michelle Obama
Yeah.
in Love, Julia Roberts,
Yeah.
who is phenomenal at keeping her class and elegance and choosing what she wants to do and going on her path with this grace and elegance.
Yeah.
And another person I would say, of course, Simone Biles. This lady changed the world with saying, hey, I'm taking care of me and I don't care what you guys want from me. I am the most important person right now.
Yeah.
And she changed the world of talking about mental health. There's no doubt about it. She absolutely, besides being, the best in the world in what she does. And there are a few other people. There are also men that I admire for various reasons. But one of the things I have found that all of them have one thing in common, at least from what we see outside. Oh, and of course, Kendra Scott,
Yeah.
one of 8 women that created a $1 billion brand.
Yeah.
They all they seem, because I don't know them personally, to be true to themselves.
Yeah.
And always, it seems like they're reflecting everything. Is it right for me? Do I want to do this? Is this the path I want to take? Is that going to make me feel okay? Is this where I want to go? And this reflection, internal one, gives them clarity, at least how it seems outside,
Yeah.
besides enormous knowledge, being likable, and a few other things.
And the one thing I think with all of them is there's a certain amount of risk that they've taken in life to get to where they're
Yes.
at. So when you look at your life, what's the biggest risk that you've ever taken?
Oh gosh, I'm a one walking risk. Uh, I moved out of the house at age of 16 where everybody thought I'm going to get immediately pregnant, which I didn't. I was with a man who was extremely abusive, and in the middle of the night, I took my child and I ran away, not knowing where I'm going.
Yeah.
I became the youngest entrepreneur female in Business Center Club in Poland, all white males over 50, that was responsible for commenting and forecasting labor market. I wrote a book where everybody thought in Polish first, and now I have few in English, where people said, you're dyslexic, there's no way you can write a book. Of course I can. You're not going to tell me that I can't.
Yeah.
I moved to the US. That was a eye-opening experience back to US when about 8 years ago,
Yeah.
where new government came and I got blacklisted and I started life from experience. I don't say from the beginning, from experience. And it was definitely ego crashing
Yeah.
because with all my educations, master's degrees, and experiences working with presidents and everything else, my first job was working at a warehouse with convicts separating hangars because nobody wanted to hire me.
Wow.
They said it's not in US. And then buying my first house in the US and then getting my kids over here, not knowing anybody. I mean, kind of knowing people from high school, but not really,
Yeah.
and going, what am I going to do next? I had no other options. So if you talk about taking risks,
Yeah.
I have few more to come.
Yeah. Yep. You are the one. So how do you balance all this out? How do you balance all of this work that you do? I mean, it's heavy stuff when you help people reprogram their brain. And then you're a human being that needs to nurture your soul. What gets you up every day to do that?
Oh, first of all, when they don't need me anymore and you see their faces light up. Sometimes it takes about 2 months for the things to kind of click. Sometimes it clicks immediately. But the fact that I know that even if I work with one person, it's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
But the truth is that I just learned not long ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago, there's no balance. Okay. Idea of a balance is fake idea. But what I do, I schedule me in before I schedule anything else. And I made myself a priority. And I run a women's group, also a mastermind for business. And we had a great conversation. They were looking, I want to help people. I'm like, that's the wrong approach. And they go, but we're being taught that. All the coaches say that. I'm like, and that's wrong. She goes, why? Because if it's not bringing you joy, you will never excel in it.
Yeah.
And if you're focusing on helping others, that's an element of people pleasing and dopamine addiction. And if that is your drive, that will just go away with time. What if you could find what makes you happy and grow that, which will be contagious to others and in turn will help others. So a very different perspective, but it allows you to keep the fuel going. And that's what I do. One of the things I found about me is I need variety. I cannot be doing the same thing over and over. That's why I speak on stages. I give talks. I do corporate trainings. Sometimes I volunteer for the Red Cross. I volunteer for other organizations and I do my coaching. And that allows me the variety. So you need to know what you love.
Yeah.
Because trust me, if I was only coaching for the next 10 years, I love what I do, but I would get bored.
Yeah.
And if I get bored, I lose the passion. If I lose the passion, my joy is not contagious. If my joy is not contagious, I'm not getting more clients. And then you go, and nothing is happening because you forgot about you.
Yeah. So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into that younger version of you 8 years ago before you're coming to America. And you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led so far, all of the things that have happened, the wisdom you've gained. What advice would you give that version of you?
You survived 100% of bad days. Life gets only better.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
I got quite a few advices, but I don't think any of them sticks out. What I think was the most important part in my life, it was to learn to trust the process, not to question everything. Believe and trust that it will work out sooner or later. And that trust, it's not necessarily trust in God, but trusting the process that what you're doing will bring results. Because I was also part of that generation that had immediate, almost immediate gratification. And that's the worst thing you can do. The delayed gratification actually builds resilience. And trusting that it is going to be okay gives you the ability to reduce anxiety and stress, and then you see clearer. So I think people who taught me that, and there were quite a few who worked on that with me, my coaches, Tony Robbins, Joseph McClendon III, Dr. Daniel Amen, and a few other people, I think that was combined the best, I guess, advice. Trust that everything will be okay. One way or the other, it will work out. Look at your past. You, even if you failed, things got better.
Yeah.
They always do. After the, my mother used to, my grandma, after the rain comes the sun.
Yep.
And that is very true. And it's so old and so cliche, but it's so true. If you are in hell, just keep walking. Even hell has a border, for crying out loud.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this. Of all of the things that you've done and evolved into and accomplished in your life, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
My daughters.
Yeah.
My daughters are absolutely amazing, phenomenal 25-year-old women. Um, Smart, beautiful, ambitious, caring, open-minded, sometimes too good to people, but that's okay. We're going to work on that. And with dreams and hopes and curiosity. And I love watching them explore the world. And I've managed to create the curiosity and the passion for learning because when you keep learning, you actually keep growing because then you get to use that knowledge. That's so important. They're absolutely amazing. They're absolutely amazing. So there's nothing more important in my life than my daughters. I don't care how much you're going to pay me. My daughters come first when it comes to work.
So let me ask you this. In the world of neuroencoding, when you find a skeptic that's not really thinking that you can construct a brain to do what you want it to do, they're stuck in old ways and they won't accept it. What do you say to them? How do you get people to come to your side of thinking?
Well, I don't actually. I ask them questions. So,
Okay.
for example, one of the questions would be, do you use electricity? I go, yeah. Do you know how it works? Well, you just flip a switch, it works, right? If I was to ask you to explain step by step how electricity is created and how it gets to that switch and how it lights a light bulb, would you be able to? Well, it's produced, and then I'm like, great. Have you ever had a situation where you didn't know why it's going to work, but it worked? I did. Okay, great. Is it possible that I can have the knowledge that could help you with that? You want to give it a try? And we do few very basic things like working with your brain and imagining food that you're eating and they describe what they're eating. They start to salivate and the whole 9 yards. And then they open their eyes. I'm like, so where's the food?
Yeah.
And they go, well, there's none. I'm like, see, you've imagined things and your brain thought it was real.
Yeah.
If I can do this just with this simple exercise, are you willing to give it a try? Now, there's some people who will never want to try anything new because they have secondary gain. And the secondary gain is if I'm miserable, people will love me and they come to help me. What will happen if I will be happy? Will I lose my friends? And they don't do it consciously. It is a subconscious need of people gathering around us and loving us, especially for people who are lonely.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I am absolutely crazy, passionate human being that loves life, loves to explore new things, values integrity above anything else, enjoys exploration, loves learning, and loves absolutely every piece of life and making the world a better place. With a lot of playfulness when allowed, and absolutely despises cilantro.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. That was loud and clear. Let me ask you this. Let's say Netflix comes up with this new way of literally transporting you to any point in history so you can watch it happen. What event in human history would you love to have been there to watch happen?
Oh my God, there's so many.
Yeah, I know. There's too much. We've done too much as humans.
Um, you know what? Although I'm not a religious person, I would like to see that dude we call Jesus
Yeah,
because I think we've created a lot of stories that are not true.
yeah,
And I would like to see that happen and get my own perspective. Because one of the things when I speak with people is that perspective is everything. Do we realize that every book for hundreds and thousands of years was written only by men because only men could read and only men could write? And guess what? Men's brains are constructed differently than
yeah,
female brains.
yeah,
So that means everything we know is through the men's perspective,
yeah.
through the men's, and there's nothing wrong with that, just to be very clear, but it is only one perspective. So what if, just what if, people who wrote that were, let's say, not very handsome, were not really loved by women, and had a crush and those crushes would reject them? How would that influence, because we know it does, how they write the stories,
Yeah.
what vocabulary they use? And I think there's so many beautiful things in the world, and we're starting to get there. There are shifts happening right now, but that's okay. It's a natural process of society developing. And women's brains, there are so many studies that show our differences, how
Mhm.
it's not that we're better, we're just different. Our brains are designed differently.
Yeah,
And to be honest, all studies in the last, I think, 20 years show that women are built for leadership.
yeah,
And nature, for some reason, has men dying sooner, and women are the carriers of wisdom to pass on to new generations. So there are a lot of things that are, very curious. And I'm just intrigued.
yeah.
How did that really play out? Because it has such a big influence on the role. And I have the privilege of knowing people from different countries, and literally, Bible is being, I don't know if it's manipulated, but understood very differently in every region, and it's influenced by culture. Like I listen sometimes to my African friends, and I'm like, is that how you guys are taught? Right? Is that really? Is that how the rituals are different? Like my Polish religious rituals, we have like breaking of bread and breaking an egg, and they go, what is that? I'm like, well, this is what we do traditionally in Europe, but we do it in Eastern Europe, but in France, they don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
The cultures, and I'm like, isn't that interesting that even this is adaptable and even the basics of understanding this book will be different depending on a culture, and the influence is so huge. So what influenced those people who wrote it?
I love that answer. That's such a great answer. So, if anyone wants to reach out, they're curious, they have questions, they want to hire you, any of the good business, where do they go?
Well, First of all, anywhere you go, Your Brain Coach D, Instagram, Facebook, my website, YouTube, anywhere you go is the same link, and you just type it in wherever you're at. You can follow me, you can write to me. I always reply. So there are workshops, webinars, free, sometimes paid, or you can just, decide to rewire your brain and have a life you choose to have instead of the life you've got.
Wonderful. This has been so great. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your story. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much. And it was a privilege to be your guest.
Absolutely.